Hey, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by. So, welcome to my new video series where I'm going to be talking about all the dungeons in Classic World of Warcraft. I'll be giving a little overview of the history of the dungeon, the bosses in the dungeon. I'll take you through the dungeon a little bit. We'll talk about loot, and eventually at the end we'll talk about what I think would be cool in a Classic Plus situation for these dungeons. So that hopefully if Blizzard sees these videos, they might take some of these ideas, or they might see what people want, and they'll work with that, and hopefully we can see something like this in Classic Plus. So today we're going to be talking about the Deadmines. This is one of my favorite dungeons, and in my opinion, it's one of the most iconic dungeons in all of Classic World of Warcraft. Quick history of the Deadmines. So the Deadmines was once the greatest gold production center in the human lands, abandoned when the Horde razed Stormwind City during the First War. After the war, the mine was rumored to be haunted, and then taken over by criminals, the Defias Brotherhood, a group of former laborers and stonemasons. The Defias are led by Edwin Van Cleef, and the band of outlaws uses the Deadmines as their hideout as they plan their offensive against Stormwind. So you'll go through the dungeon, you'll run through the mines, you'll be fighting miners, different Defias-like fighters, mages, and eventually you'll get to your first boss, and that is Raxor. He's a powerful ogre, and he's Van Cleef's foreman. You'll be fighting him with 2 henchmen, and if you're lucky enough, you'll get his club. You'll go through the dungeon a little more, fighting more miners. You'll be fighting more mages and fighters, and eventually you'll get to this room full of goblins, and they're all lumber workers, and they are working on building masts and different pieces for the ship that you'll see further down in the dungeon. So in this room, you'll find the boss Sneed, and he's a goblin riding a shredder, and he's the Defias Lumber Master. So you'll fight him and his shredder robot, and then when the shredder robot's defeated, he'll jump out, and then you'll fight him. And he has some pretty cool drops, like the dagger. Later in further expansions, they made that dagger a blue, but in Classic, I believe it's a white. And then you'll go a little further down, fighting more miners and goblins and Defias members, and you'll eventually get to the Goblin Foundry. And it opens up and it's this giant smelting room with these lava pools flowing down, and it's filled with goblin craftsmen and tinkerers who make these little robots that you fight. So you'll clear out the room, and then you'll get to Gilned, and he is a master goblin, and he is the head smelter for Van Cleef. So you'll fight him, and then that'll unlock the next part of the dungeon. And then eventually, you'll get to Ironclad Cove. So Ironclad Cove is kind of like the climax of the dungeon. It's the final room, and it's kind of the most cinematic piece. It's this big cove with a big pirate ship in the middle, full of cannons and Defias pirates. If you're lucky enough, you can kill one of the pirates and get one of their parrots as a pet. In this room, you'll find Mr. Smite, and he's the first boss that you'll fight, and he is a Tauren pirate, and he's the first mate under Captain Greenskin. And then you will find Captain Greenskin, and he is a goblin boss and lieutenant of Van Cleef. And you'll fight him, and he has some pretty cool loot, which I'll touch on in the next slide. And then you have Edwin Van Cleef, and he is the leader of the Defias Brotherhood. Killing him, you'll get some of the best loot in the dungeon, and he's probably the toughest fight because he has a few guys that he summons to help him. And then at the very end, you can fight the meme boss Cookie, and he's the Murloc, who is the ship's cook. Alright, so talking about some of the loot that drops in this dungeon. I'll just kind of squat down so you all can get a good view of the the nice little infograph. So Cookie, he drops the Tenderizer and the Wand. The Wand is a nice little piece for casters at that level. Captain Greenskin, he has the Impaling Harpoon, the Emberstone Staff, and the Blackened Defias Belt. Edwin Van Cleef, he'll drop the Blackened Defias Armor, the Cruel Barb, the Cape of the Brotherhood, and the Corsair's Overshirt. And I would just like to thank, let me duck down, warcrafttavern.com. I found this on their website, and I thought it was a really nice little piece to add to the slideshow. So a few things I'd like to touch on before we get to the Classic Plus parts. There's already some really cool items in this dungeon. You'll see the Blackened Defias belt and armor. That's part of a set that's really nice for rogues early on. You end up looking kind of like a black, dark ninja. It's a really cool aesthetic, especially early on, to have a full set like that. That Cruel Barb, it's really good for twinks. So a twink is like the highest level of a battleground bracket. So the first battleground bracket is 10 to 19, and what a twink will do is they'll stay at level 19. They'll collect as much of the best gear at that level they can so that they can perform at kind of the highest level in that battleground. It's a really fun type of gameplay that players came up with, and I think a lot of these drops in this dungeon kind of complement that gameplay, which I'll touch on a little bit in the next slide. So my ideas for Classic Plus. So I think it would be kind of an obvious to add additional rooms, you know. Let me step to the side so you can read this. So additional rooms. So maybe a mechanic where you blow open a rock wall to reveal a new tunnel, a new room, a new boss, similar to Nomergon. So there's a fight in Nomergon where you have to blow open the rock walls and a Trog boss eventually comes out and you fight. I think that would be a cool mechanic to add to this to expand on the dungeon. And that way you don't have to carve out what's already there. You can kind of just add to the dungeon. So maybe at the very end, before you leave the dungeon, there's some treasure chests. Maybe there's 3, and when you open one, the other 2 turn into mimics. And you can have really fun randomized loot for this encounter. Maybe the giant door that opens to Stranglethorn Vale. Maybe it opens and there's a Hydra or a sea creature. Does it make sense? Maybe not. Is it cool? I think it's pretty badass, yeah. And then maybe you could add a stonemason's room. This would be lore accurate, as the Defias are ex-laborers and stonemasons. And you could have a master stonemason boss, similar to the lumber master Sneed. Maybe this boss could drop a hammer, which would be kind of like a stonemason's tool, a chisel, which would be good for rogues. You could really add quite a bit of variety with the additions to this dungeon. And the nice thing is, if you said, went with the treasure chest idea, any of the classes that really don't get much love in terms of the loot table here, you can kind of round off with this treasure chest idea where it's treasure that the Defias have pillaged and looted, and you kind of pick from it. So these are just a few of the ideas I had for, the Classic Plus version of what the Deadmines would look like. If you have any ideas, I would love to hear them. Comment them below, because you never know who's reading the comments and you never know who's watching. So I hope you all liked the video. I am going to be doing one of these for every dungeon, and comment what you liked, comment what you don't like. I would love to hear feedback, how I can improve these videos for you guys. And yeah, until the next video, thank you so much for coming by, and yeah, we'll see you real soon.